was in Delhi and Islamabad at the time, when you cut the air with a knife. The prospect of careful, rational calculation of self-interest is something that's very, very, very problematic indeed. And indeed, when you look back over the history of the Cold War, I think it's fair to say, as we say in our report, is not a result of the inherent stability of the mutually assured destruction nuclear deterrence system. It's not certainly the product of any inherent statesmanship on the part of the leadership of the major blocs during the Cold War years. Rather, the fact that we did not have a nuclear weapons catastrophe during the whole Cold War years is a function of sheer dumb luck. Sheer dumb luck, because so often human error, system error, miscalculation, misperception could have taken this thing over the edge. And there are example after example after example out there in the literature now. The one that I like best is the Cuban Missile Crisis, when people just don't realise how close we were to World War III, but it's now come out in the literature. The closest of all was when there were Russian submarines in the Caribbean surrounding Cuba. At the time, and for a long time afterwards, it was believed that there were no actual nuclear weapons on Cuba or in the water, and they were coming by ship, and the whole nature of the blockade enterprise and the tension was to stop weapons arriving in Cuba. But in fact, there were a number of submarines with nuclear-tipped torpedoes, Russian submarines, Soviet submarines in the water. And on one occasion during the crisis, US naval ships were dropping depth charges, not in order to actually destroy the submarines, that would have precipitated a real crisis, but just to indicate that the US was there and to give them a bit of a hurry up. But one such depth charge actually knocked out the communications of the Soviet submarine. And the protocols that applied in those circumstances from Moscow were that if a submarine lost its communications as a result of some kind of enemy action, it was left completely to the discretion of the submarine commander as to whether to fire his nuclear torpedo. The presumption being, of course, that if you knocked out enemy action, the war's already going on, so use them or lose them, the war is on. In fact, the submarine commander in question thought that was a hell of a big decision to make, so he put it to a vote of himself and the two deputies on the submarine. And let me tell you, by a vote of 2-1, World War III was averted. So, I mean, this is the reality. I mean, the other point to make in this context is rational calculation, India, Pakistan, absolute geographical